So, welcome everyone. Just looking down the list, a lot of familiar names here. People that have spoken at the event. Dan, welcome back. Dan was one of the people that spoke at the very first one we did, and a lot of new names kind of joining as well. So, as always, let me just give a quick intro to those who are kind of joining for the first time. My name is Ryan Garner. I work for 11FS. I head up our customer strategy team there, and Jobs to be Done is one of the key things that we use to identify growth opportunities for financial services businesses or fintech businesses for that matter. And it's integral to how we design products and take them to market. And so this community here has been set up for over about, 2 years now. And its aim is to bring together all of those people interested in jobs to be done so they can share their experiences and learn from each other. Today, we're going to be doing just that. And we have a very special guest who knows a thing or two about jobs to be done. Bob is here with us. And we're going to be talking to Bob about his new book, Demand Side Sales. So thanks for joining us, Bob.
Thank you for having me. To be honest, I love the enthusiasm, and to be honest, I'd love to continue to participate, because at some point this is about sharing and helping people apply the notion of jobs to be done more and more. So, thanks for having me on.
Not a problem. So, format for today, very quickly. I'm going to be chatting to Bob about his book. He's probably going to be sharing some slides or some bits and pieces from his book. I've got a load of questions. I'm sure everyone has got a load of questions. So if you've got a question, there's a Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. Write your questions in there and give them the thumbs up if you like them, and the ones that rise to the top will get asked first. And we'll go from there. So let's get started. Bob, I think many people listening will be aware of you and your work. It would be great to hear a little bit about your background, and before we dive into sales and the book and everything, kind of journey with jobs to be done and your involvement in developing it, and just a little bit of that background would be really
So the way I usually start that out is I've been breaking things for about 50 years. I've been fixing things for about 45 years, and I've been building things for about 30 years. I think as a child, I was pretty ambitious and lots of risk-taking. I had 3 close head brain injuries by the time I was 7 that very limited my ability to read and to write, which in some cases technically being diagnosed as dyslexic. But the reality is, it's one of the greatest gifts I think I ever got, because it forced me to think very, very differently about things and to realize I had to learn in a different way. And so I have an engineering background. I basically have electrical engineering undergrad and then studied both chemical and mechanical. And I started at 18 working for a gentleman by the name of Dr. Deming. And he basically was the father of the quality movement, the father of lean, the father of agile. Like, if you look at all that kind of stuff, all roads lead back to Dr. Deming. And he just was, I thought at some point he was one of my friend's grandfathers. That he wasn't, but I asked him like 40 questions in about 20 minutes. And he goes, "Aren't you curious? Like, how'd you like to work for me?" I'm like, "Sure." And so I ended up learning all those kinds of things. And so I've been building products and developing things from everything from cars to guidance systems for missiles to space shuttle main engines to Pokemon mac and cheese, cholesterol-lowering margarine, base camp, you name it, I've pretty much worked on. I've done about 3,500 different projects. And so for me, jobs is one of those things that was a hack in the beginning, which was I couldn't understand the research reports. And I just remember everything being correlative. And Deming always, he was very hard of hearing, and so he would yell at me. And being 18, I didn't realize it was him, not me. But he would always say, "Don't ever confuse correlation with causation." And so to me, understanding what caused people to buy or caused people to actually make progress is kind of the foundations of the jobs to be done framework.
Great. And you've been running the Rewired group and publishing a lot of content for for many years now. How has that evolved into the book that you kind of have written today? And do you know things? Do you have a different perspective now than you did, all those years ago when you started publishing the content?
So I think, so first of all, because it's hard for me to read and write, most of the stuff that I was doing was podcasts, or, I'd have to partner with somebody, and I'd have to, I wrote a book with Michael Hone around college. I partnered with Clay on competing against luck. And so there was different things that I basically had to try to create content. All right. I think the other thing is that I think that from an introductory perspective, the Competing Against Luck book is a very good book that Clay, I could never ask my customers for a case study, but when Clay Christian from the Harvard Business School says, "Hey, can we get a case study?" They say, "Sure." So that's one of the things I learned. But what I did is I found a process through a company called Scribe Media, who helped me organize my thoughts. And to be honest, the sales book was it's a prototype, and it's a prototype for a couple of things. I think it was an MVP to say, should I be building some products in this space? Why do people struggle? And so they actually helped me kind of see the opportunity. And it's something Clay and I have been talking about for almost 10 years around why are there no sales professors? And having done 7 startups, the whole aspect here is the hardest thing is sales. Like, you ask any startup the hardest part, it's always sales. And nobody wants to talk about sales, and there's no theory behind sales. And so maybe we need to actually just help people with sales this way. And so this is really kind of that first test to say, can we show how versatile the theory is by saying, if you flip it from how to actually build product to flip it to the demand side to say, how do we actually help people make progress? It actually makes it easier to sell. And to be honest, there's a lot of people who sell who don't even know they sell. And think of a teacher. A teacher actually sells a lesson to a student, right? Yeah. But the reality is the teacher actually helps the student make progress. And so that's the actual frame that we should be landing around. So it's don't sell me a mattress. It's like, help me sleep tonight, right? And when you do that, you start to realize it's not just the mattress. It might be a whole bunch of other things. And so it's taking that perspective of the consumer and realizing they're the ones who determine value, what is valuable to them and what they're willing to give their money up for. And so to me, that's where this kind of all started is the struggling moments around startups and sales and the fact that there were no sales professors.
Yeah. And before reading your book, I had never really realized that there were no university courses for this.
There are now. So I don't want, but this was 10 years ago. Why do they not teach sales? And it's related to the product or the service. It's very, every company has their own way of doing it, but I'm yeah, but how do you not teach the fundamentals of sales in a business school? It's just, it's like trying to learn finance without knowing accounting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's really what the purpose of the book was, is can we use the frame and the theory as one of the foundational pieces so we can actually get a class at Techstars and teach Techstars and Y Combinator and these other places. They teach them how to raise money, but they don't teach them how to sell. And by the way, they have to sell co-founders, they have to sell investors, they have to sell basically employees. They actually have to help all of them make progress. And so when you flip it that way, it doesn't feel as icky. I always thought sales felt really icky to me, especially when that was my job. It was really hard.
Yeah. And you talk about kind of sales being icky in the kind of current or in a supply side thinking mindset. And I love how you kind of flip that to sales being more of a concierge or a coach or a helper or a mentor. Yeah. How do you think kind of salespeople can make that shift if they recognize they're being a bit kind of product feature focused? How do they make
So here's the thing is when you actually study really, really good salespeople, that's what they do already. But it took them 20 years to actually get to that point. Right. And there's these people who are stuck in between where all they're learning is product features and benefits and how to actually, run promotions and how to actually close the sale, as opposed to literally being able to understand why people are buying it. And so the really good salespeople already do this. And so this is really kind of the language and some frameworks to help somebody who's been doing sales for 2 years to actually have the experience of somebody who's been doing it for 20 years. That's really kind of the goal here, is to help. Like, nobody wants to be sold to, right? Everybody wants to buy something to help them get better. But the reality is, like, nobody wants to be sold a mattress. They actually want to just buy better sleep.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dig into some of those frameworks and that toolkit.
So there's two main frameworks. So I'm gonna. Is it better to share, or is it better just to do kind of?
Please feel free to share.
So you want to do the share side and have my video, right? So side by side. I do this, and then I'll do this, and then I'll do this, and then I'll do this. So there's really three, kind of key frameworks, right? That help us see that. I'm just making sure you can. You have the wrong side still. You tell me when you can see it.
I can see it. Yeah, it's all good.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back up here first. Sorry. So the first thing really gets back to this notion of supply side versus demand side, right? And that, I grew up on this supply side of where, I have a company that basically produces a product, and I've got, features and benefits and experiences and attributes, and I design and I build, and, it makes money, and it's, charging a price. And what happens is there's this wall, this very big, thick concrete wall that we peer over, that literally then, we see the customer. And what happens is we end up seeing all these, what I call correlations or aggregations, right? There's the market, the segments, the personas, the prospects, the leads, but we know who they are, and we know like how to get their attention. But what we don't really study much is like what causes them to buy. And so when you start to flip to the other side, right, you start to realize that the struggling moment is the seed that causes it all. Like if people don't struggle, we just keep doing what we were doing before because it's good enough. So if something breaks, we just replace it with the same thing that's there, right? And otherwise, like if we run out of Tide, we just buy Tide, right? But that's not what causes people to make progress. The new product that you're building, the thing that you're trying to sell them, they have to actually want to be better. And so that struggling moment comes because of two things: a current product or a current thing they're doing, which in some cases is doing nothing, is doing something, right? And it's a context that they're in that makes the struggle actually kind of appear. And the moment that they actually acknowledge the struggling moment, they come and they actually then have this new desired outcome. So people will say, what's the pain people have? But it's not just the pain, it's the pain and the gain together that enable them to actually then say, well, what should I get? And what are the hiring and firing criteria, and what are the trade-offs? And so this is what we actually ultimately call a job to be done, right? So and what people do when they're doing this, they look over the wall, and they just see a company and a brand and a product. They don't know how half of it works. And at some point they got to educate themselves. But the reality is they're focused on actually getting good sleep, not being able to understand the difference between a hybrid mattress and a cooling mattress and a spring mattress. Is like, I need to know how to sleep better. Right? And so we end up having these disconnects all over the place. And so ultimately what we tried to do is basically take the notion of jobs. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Sorry. I'll just go down a little bit far. And this notion of being in a struggling moment and trying to actually get to a point where we understand kind of the progress they're trying to make. Sorry. I should have been a little bit, I just was in the wrong place. Right? It's people don't buy products, they hire them to do a job in their life, right? And so what is the circumstance that causes them to say, today's the day they need to download your software, or that they're looking for something new, right? And what are they hoping for on the other side? If there's just a bunch of problems and there's no idea of what's next, this is where people complain, but they don't do anything about it. They have to actually see what is the output or what is the outcome that they actually are trying to get to, right? And so for us, we actually use two big frameworks. One is the forces of progress, which is there's some push, something that's going on in their life that says, today's the day I got to do something. And so what are those underlying push things, right? This is too slow, we're growing and we don't have enough capacity. Like what are those things that are saying today we have to do something? And then what are they hoping for? And so it's ultimately going back to this vision here, is like, I really don't need to know how they're going to cross the river. I need to know why they're at the river and what they want to do on the other side. And then I can actually, as an innovator, I can come up with 100 ways to get across that river. I can actually build a boat. I can build a bridge. I can dig a tunnel. I can get a rocket. I can actually, there's just, I mean, I can go on, right? But what I'm actually trying to do is frame the situation they're in and why they're there and what they hope for, and ultimately understand both these forces of push and pull, but then the anxiety and the habits. The anxiety of the new is like, they'll say, oh my God, I love this feature. But then it's going to be like, well, what do I do with my old data? Right? And so what you start to realize is like, these are not one hit wonders. People aren't buying things for one reason. They're buying things for sets of reasons. And so these are the underlying causal mechanisms that cause people to say, today's the day, I need a better way to make a payment, right? The second part of this is that there's a process by which people do this. So one of the things that I did is I actually studied criminal and intelligence interrogation. I went off and basically said, like, how do we actually understand what people say when what do they mean when they say things? And how do I know when they're lying? And how do I actually kind of fact check them without having to, be belligerent, if you will. And so part of this is to actually understand not only when did they buy it? So for example, somebody might download something, but that actually might be active looking. It's when they actually start to use it to actually make progress. That's when we want to see it. And so we want to understand, when did they have the first thought? When did they have what's passive looking look like? What does active looking look like, et cetera? And ultimately, the sales process that I'm proposing is that we don't think about it as the sales funnel anymore. We think about it as the progress making timeline. And so what we end up doing is we take that timeline and we unpack it from the customer side. And so think of it as that the customer has to make progress, or the customer is going to make progress. And they have these systems that they have internally to them. And us as sales and marketing and customer success provide them inputs to help them actually do each one of these phases. So the first thought is really about making the space in the brain. Like there's just not enough room for people to remember everything. And what we find is that the initial struggling moment is about, creating the space that a solution can fall into. Clay said it best. He said, questions create spaces in the brain for solutions to fall into. So part of this is, how do we do that? Well, they do that, customers, but we help them by asking them questions, and don't answer it. We give them new metrics, so they actually have to dig in to understand, like, well, how much REM sleep do you get, right? Or we tell them a story, or we state the obvious. But once they actually create that space, which is what I call that first phase, they move to passive looking, where they have to learn more about it. And they learn because now they have the space, they can put things into it. They like you see all these commercials, or you see all these different solutions, but if you don't have a space for it, it literally bounces off your head. And so once the space is there, you start to absorb it and pull it in, right? And then at some point in time, and it's mostly in passive looking, you hear people saying, I need to know, I want to learn about. And then active looking is it's about seeing possibilities. It's about seeing things as independent things, like I need this and I need that and I need that, but it's not connecting the dots. It's almost like magic wanding to me. And then they move to deciding, and deciding is actually all about trade-offs. We try to give them a demo here in active looking, and the reality is then we try to close them and say, well, do we have a deal? But part of actually deciding is framing things as and being able to let go of certain things. And it's actually a notion of making decisions, and it's not about making everything perfect. And so you find out that real satisfaction comes when there's a lot of detail here in the deciding part. And then this is what I call the big hire. This is where people decide to buy the bottle of Windex, or they decide to basically download or we're going to install this new app. But the first use and the ongoing use is where the little hires happen that actually help them make the progress. And so how do we what inputs do we provide? So ultimately, there's this notion, sorry, I'm jumping through a couple of things. We can come back to it if we want to. But sorry, it's easier than if I do it the other way. Yeah. So the old way, basically marketing hands off leads to sales, and then sales hands off contracts to customer success. And what we end up having is all this friction along the traditional sales funnel. But the reality is like marketing, sales, and customer success have to actually provide inputs. All three of them should be providing inputs all the way along here to help the customer make progress. And so part of this is to realize, like, at some point, how do we get I actually need marketing and good marketing and onboard as part of onboarding. right? And we leave that to customer success, but marketing has great ways in which to help us onboard people who are new to the process. It's what they do, right? And so we end up not being able to actually connect the right systems together. So to me, thinking about it from the demand side is really how to be honest, I've been able, for me, to make sales feel less icky, but also understand how to help people as opposed to just sell my product and be a salesman, or salesperson.
That's great. There's a lot to unpack there. So let's start with the struggling moment.
Yeah.
You talked at the start about working across lots of different industry sectors. In your experience, is there always a struggling moment? Because, say, for example, luxury goods, is there a struggling moment there, or are people just aspiring for grudge purchases like, insurance? We just have to renew our insurance every time. It becomes a bit of a habit rather than a choice. So what's your
yeah. So the habitual things are not what I'm talking about. So my thing is, if I'm just buying insurance, or to be honest, if I have no choice, it's really not necessarily a job. And I don't know how to innovate around that space. It's the fact of when people want to be better. And so what you say is luxury goods, you could say, well, there's no real problem. But when you actually interview people, there are problems, but they actually tend to be more what I would call social and emotional problems that then cause them to buy something new than just functional problems. It works fine. It's just not the latest. And the latest is, well, why is the latest important? Well, the latest is important because I want to be seen as a leader. Well, why is that important? Well, I'm in this business and this is important for me to be seen this way. And so all of a sudden you start to believe that a lot of luxury goods are either about making them feel better or basically helping them give signals to other people about their status. And so you start to realize that in some cases what it's more about than it is just about being, a Mercedes is as good as a Ford Taurus, but the reality is at some point in time, the aspect is functionally they get you from A to B, but emotionally they're very different cars.
Yeah, sure. The other question I had was regarding the structuring the kind of interview around the purchase process. And that works in so many cases, but there's been the odd case where that's sometimes been a little bit tricky. So if we kind of rewind maybe 3 or 4 years before any of the challenger banks came out, no one switched banks. They got a bank account when they were old enough.
They did. They actually did. That they were hard to see because and they have millions of bank accounts. But I actually did work, in some cases 5-6 years ago, and as long as 10 years goes with bank, where you sound. The thing is that people were they didn't even know they had a problem, right? Mm-hmm. And so part of it is the hassle of actually switching banks was hard. And so part of it was this aspect of being able to actually understand how to activate them, how to create the space in the brain to say, like, do you really like one of my favorite interviews of all time is a bank where the person literally runs a bakery and they go into the bank and they get paid by check. And it's an old school business, but it's this notion of that this person is very, very busy and they got a lot of things to do, but they actually take all the checks and they go to the bank. And the way they described it, it's like, this is my moment to basically, like, my 10 minutes to go, like, I'm making it. Like, I'm depositing $100,000 in the bank because we did this and this week. Here's what's going on. Nobody else did it. But it was that aspect of doing it. And when he walked into the bank, the fact is, like, everybody ran. He goes, it felt like somebody turned on the lights in a kitchen where there's a bunch of cockroaches. Everybody's just running to all these different places. And it's this notion of, like, all this stuff that they were putting up with and that they didn't actually realize. It was like almost like death by 1,000 cuts. So this is where there's non-consumption, where people are struggling, but they actually have no way to articulate it. Or at some point in time, they feel it, but they can't say it. And so part of this, there's a whole bunch, like, I think email is, what they did with Hey is amazing, because think of how many people say, well, if you struggle with anything in your day, what is it? And almost everybody says email. And it's been almost 15 years since somebody came up with really a very different way in which to do email. And so it wasn't people were asking for better email. It's just the fact they just accepted it, but it's still there. The demand is actually created by struggling moments. It's not created by supply, as economists want us to think. So ultimately, Paul LeBlanc is he's the president of Southern New Hampshire University, and We did some work with him where he basically said, look, how many people want to go back to college and get a degree that didn't finish, right? And the notion is like at some point, it was so underserved at the time that he did an ad and he got 10,000 people to apply when the school only had 1,000 applications usually. It's now over almost 200,000 students. It's the largest university in the world and nobody even knows it. And all they focus on is helping people finish or start college without having to go on campus. Mm-hmm. Right. And so part of this is the struggling moments this is where what we call non-consumption, where people want to make progress, but they can't. This is where where real growth comes from. And so that's where we spend a lot of time understanding where's that pent up energy where people are willing to invest in order to basically get it. And by the way, they're willing to invest without actually having it be the perfect solution. It doesn't have to be the Harvard experience. It's literally just help me get my nursing degree. Help me get my, my project management, a degree in business so I can get a project management job. Like it's very simple things and you start to realize it and it's widely applicable.
Sure. Bob, I don't know if you could switch your camera back on. We can't see.
I'm sorry. It's not back on. Why is it? Hold on. This is going to be a problem. Sorry I didn't realize it was off. Let's see if we do that. It's on there. Let's see. Oh, it's probably going to go to this one. All right. We're going to go to this one. Sorry. Back to the FaceTime. There we go. Sorry.
Brilliant.
I didn't know that had happened.
I've got a lot more questions, but I'm going to start asking some questions from some of the people listening. Another person called Ryan G. That's not me. I believe that's Ryan Gamble. And he asked, what was the aha moment that made you realize jobs to be done could be stacked onto sales with a demand generation focus?
So that's a great question. I think I always thought them as like very different things, right? And I think part of it happened when Clay said, I want to turn jobs. So to me, jobs is a method and an approach and kind of a mindset. But Clay said we need to turn it into a theory. And the moment that we turned it into a theory, or he helped turn it into a theory, it allowed it to be applied in some very strange places. Like I've been doing work on understanding what causes people to switch religions, right? I'm like, okay. And then at some point in time, like you start to see these, like, I'm doing some work now on what causes people to switch companies. So it's almost like companies hire employees, but employees hire companies just as much, right? And so I think part of this got to be when we started to see what these were, and I build product off of is one thing, but then when you could actually start to understand that information in those interviews we used could help the salespeople build their pitch, could help them actually do their positioning, could actually help them understand kind of the demo and what has to happen in the demo. You start to realize like the jobs interviews can be very useful in that way. And then you start to realize, you start to peel that onion back, and the aha was kind of like, why is nobody teaching sales? I think that was the biggest kind of push that I got, is like if I could learn about it, I wanted to go learn about it. And what happens is the people who are teaching sales are, I'll say, professional firms, but they're all have a different process and technique, and they make it all about a process or a technique and not a generalized theory. And so that was kind of the aha of like, maybe we can use jobs theory to help explain sales.
I guess one of the things that struck me is that I've been using jobs to be done for kind of product design and product marketing and things like that. But when I think about doing an interview, like I loved how you kind of wrote the interviews in the book, by the way. They're great how you broke that down into game on.
I'll say the writer that I end up doing, we would spend hours on the phone, and then she would just kind of synthesize it all, and she did an amazing job. She's like, I've listened to it. I can't read it, but I've listened to it. She did great.
Yeah. The thing that struck me is doing those interviews for research, to inform kind of product or marketing outputs is one thing, but doing that length of an interview in a sales process might be too long. So do you think this is a shorter, abridged version, or?
Yeah. So once you see the patterns, it's kind of like you end up seeing the forces that are at play. And so you can actually end up using it to narrow down by asking a series of questions. So there's a little game, it's called 20 questions, and you think of an item and basically it asks you 20 questions and it'll figure it out, right? And it's that kind of thing. Is once I've done the first set of interviews, the raw interviews, you're able to actually kind of see these dominoes that have to be part of the play to enable people to make progress. And so part of this is to actually, by asking people around these things. So for example, in the banking kind of situation, like if people are switching banks, right? One of the questions is going to be is like, are you growing or not? Because when they're growing, they actually have their need for capital is very different than if they're a stable running business, right? Or if they're switching their business model. So what is the context that they're in? And when we understand the context we're in, we can actually understand then kind of how things will change because of that context. And so to me, I don't have to do the free form interview. I can actually do a very short formed interview that actually is informed by these causal mechanisms that enable me to ask, is it more about this or more about that? So I can frame up which job they're in, right? So an example of that is like I work with a company called Autobooks, right? And one of the things we did is, as we did that, let's see, I got to go here. I'm going to go back up, right? What we end up doing here is we actually take a bank who's a prospect for their service. And by asking just a few, where, when, and why, where are they? We can actually figure out which job they're in, right? Are they actually trying to increase deposits and help small business? Are they actually, they have marketing dollars and they're looking actually to it's almost like it's this time to actually spend the dollars, or is this really about changing to a whole digital platform? Like, there's very specific context around the bank that says today's the day I want this feature. It's not one, it's actually three. And once we actually understand which job it is, then we can actually say, where are they in the timeline? Are they actually just starting? Are they passive looking? What kind of demo do we offer them? How do we actually help them go through the process? And what we end up doing for them is in the process, we end up, instead of having one demo that drove them crazy, right? They'd change it every 90 days. We actually figured out how to build 3 demos. And they're very fundamentally different, right? And these 3 demos, where one is about learning and where you talk about case studies and you actually talk more about them and you give them a little taste to then say, well, if you really want to see possibilities, we need to get marketing together. We need to get all these people together. And so instead of having one demo, they actually created 3 demos, right? And it made people earn the right to each of the next demos, because if they didn't have enough energy coming out of the first demo to do the second one, or it was too much of a push from our side and not a pull, they almost would never make it. So part of this is actually finding out when are people really ready for the next demo. Yeah. And ultimately they're able to close almost double the close rate and have the time to close, because they actually figured out where people were in the timeline.
Yeah, that's a really interesting case study. Because there's a distinction between sales for a product, as in a software product, yep, with kind of fixed parameters, and selling kind of services or human services or consulting or things like that.
Well, the way I think about it is that, and I'm just going to go back to a slide, is the supply side actually has a sales funnel. Right? But let's be clear, nothing leaves the sales funnel. Everything either goes through or goes out. But in a timeline, I could be actually in the middle of deciding, and then my context changes and I go back to passive looking. And so part of this is that I'm not saying we should get rid of the sales funnel, but we actually have to think about how we should be designing the sales funnel to be respectful to basically how people want to buy and the progress they're trying to make, not how we can sell. And so my belief is that most sales has been just passed down over time to say, well, we generate a lead and that lead gets turned into a thing. And the big thing is a demo, and we should be able to close after the demo. And so if we're not closing, it's a demo problem, or no, it's a lead problem. And you're literally trying to fix you're literally running around trying to fix all these problems in the sales process when you actually don't even understand how people buy.
Yeah.
Right. And so the bigger part to me was almost like we had all this information for innovation and sales wasn't utilizing it. So it's like, well, what if we actually made this accessible to the salespeople? And then I realized, like, God, sales is a really hard place. It's like, you're pretty much left up on your own. You've got features and benefit, pre-planned presentations. Yet, like, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I could never sell that way. And so when we started to actually help a few companies change the way they sell, I'm like, there's something here.
Right. Okay. Okay. I'm just going to go back to the Q&A questions. There's some good ones coming up. So John Gissif, I hope I pronounced your surname right. In a B2B setting, oftentimes the customer is a buy-in group that all have to arrive at consensus around your product or service being the right one to help them make progress.
Yeah.
You evaluate each buyer type, e.g. economic, user, technical, etc., using your framework or the buying group as a whole. What's your approach?
Yeah. So people buy things, right? And so it's about understanding the people who buy. And what you start to realize is like there are people who are giving energy to get this through, and there are people who are holding the energy back. So it gets actually back to these forces, because at some point in time, sometimes the technical people, they don't want, what their job is to find all, their job is to actually raise all the anxiety of what's possible and what cannot happen. But they're actually not a force to make progress happen. They're actually a force that hinders progress. And so part of this is to understand what does progress look like for each person as they go through this, and what are they trying, what does success look like for them, but ultimately realizing that in the process there are trade-offs, right? And the interesting part is most people feel like if I don't satisfy every single one of these things, they will never buy. And my belief is, and my experience would say, that's actually never true. There's always a trade-off, and there's always things where people are willing to take a risk or willing to do something, and it makes us feel like we have to build the perfect thing before we can actually launch it. And my belief is that when you start to understand the progress people are making, it has to be better than what I'm doing, not necessarily better than all the competition, right? My favorite is when people say, well, this other company we're talking to, they have this feature, that feature, that feature. And my whole thing is like, great. Why are those features so important to you? What are you trying to accomplish with those features? And oh, by the way, we have those things, but they're actually done in a different way. So a lot of times people end up copying features which actually aren't even relevant because they think from a sales perspective, like, oh, if we had that feature, they would have bought. That's not the case. This is where you have to dig past, I call it the cake layer of stuff people say, down to the meat, down to the underlying kind of causal things to say, like, what are they actually saying? What's their intent when they say, boy, I need it to be faster? Is that faster to install? Faster to actually do more things? Are they trying to build capacity? Or are they actually trying to take costs out? Like, what is the outcome of faster? Not faster. And so this is where we tend to just stop when they say things we think we understand, but we actually have to go deeper, like almost 5 times deeper than what we usually get. I don't, and those, Brian, you got to help me to make sure I'm answering the question, because sometimes I feel like I'm going off in a different tangent.
No, it's all really interesting. It kind of, the questions direct the conversation really. The making the trade-offs bits I think is really interesting, and I think one of the things that's actually one of the most critical areas in thinking about what you kind of promote the most within your product. So how do you go about identifying which of those features are most important in those trade-offs that customers are making? And is that just through lots of conversations and lots of interviews?
So ultimately, when you understand kind of the underlying causal mechanisms, and you understand, so let's take somebody's choosing to go back to school, right? And there's 5 different jobs around going back to school, right? One of them is help me escape. Like, I don't really like what I'm doing. It's a way in which I can legitimately talk to other people and say, like, look, I don't like what I'm doing, but I'm going to go back to school and get my master's, or I'm going to go back to school and get I'm going to go from being a teacher to a nurse, right? Another one is help me step it up, right? And another one after that is what is it? Help do what's expected of me. Like, if I want to become a partner, I got to go get my MBA, and so I'll do my MBA because I'm expected, right? So part of this is, as you actually understand kind of the set, now it's about the people who are step it up. They're actually interested in getting the certificate, help me find a job, help me make sure I've got a career. They're actually people who are willing to invest a lot more than the people who are like, help do what's expected of me. And so part of this is the feature set is when help do what's expected of me is literally like making sure that everybody around them from a social perspective agrees that this is the place they should go, versus, and when it's step it up, it's like, how fast can you get me through so I can actually start, building my career. And so you start to realize that when you have that context, I don't have to talk about 20 features. I actually only have 3 or 4 real features that are important for them to basically say that this is the solution. I feel like the way when I built homes, right? So one of the things I did when I built homes is like, because I knew the job that they were trying to get done, our pitch, our ability to actually sell them on the community and everything else was a third or a quarter of everybody else's. And it was based on basically asking them 5 questions. And once we asked the 5 questions, we knew exactly what to say, and to be honest, what not to say. Because what happens is everybody had one pre-planned presentation where they tell them everything. And then they'll go like, I really don't need those 5 things. Can I get a discount? Because I don't really need this stuff.
Right. Interesting. So that's where you start to kind of work against yourself, really.
Exactly. We keep adding features, and the fact is when they don't need them, that's when they go like, yeah, it's a little over-engineered for me. Like, can I get a discount? And you're like, wait, what? And you start to realize if you just didn't mention it, they would have paid full price.
Yeah. That's a
creates an anxiety, right? Crazy.
Okay, so this is a very popular question, been voted up a lot, and actually it's something that I've heard quite a few times throughout the kind of years of doing these meetups. So it's from Teddy, and he says, having done a lot of jobs to be done interviews, I'm still struggling with synthesizing data from multiple interviews. Yeah. Any tips on packaging and presenting the results from multiple interviews?
Yeah. So, all right, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. So I totally get that. And to be honest, I know it's a struggling moment for a lot of people. So I'm actually working on some software with Ryan Singer to do that, but I can give you the lowdown and some of the basics of how we do that. So let me see if I can just pull it up. I'm going to, I know you can't, can you see my screen yet or no? I hope not.
Not yet.
Hold on a second. Bang. Treehouse. So we have a, let me see here. So I just made I made a change to, but you can see the basic premise of it. All right. So now I got to go back here and share. Hold on. Share screen. Bang. So where is it? This one. So what we're doing is so this is a project around basically helping people understand why do they actually switch companies. So it's actually what's your next job, right? Why, like what causes you to leave, what causes you to go. And so what we've done is we've basically created a way, and this is very early. So there's no UX right now. We're just basically putting together the right data sets to get there. But it's literally getting a setup to help us remember. We've got pushes, we've got pulls, we've got habits, we've got anxieties, we got observations. And around this, it's like, at some point, they're all framed as, for example, the pushes, when somebody close to me recommends a path, when piecemealing my solution is not going to work, when my work environment has been reset and new leadership is starting over. These are all things that people have said, and we're basically at the end of every interview, we're codifying that data. Right. And so as we do it, we talk about who they were, what story was it, and what did they go from A to B, what was the switching moment around it. And then we have a bunch of questions around kind of observations. What was the firing criteria of the old? What was the hiring criteria of the new? So it's literally analyzing each interview before we move on to the next one and codifying all the connective tissue around it, but making sure that we've got here are the underlying mechanisms that cause them to actually do what they have to do. And as we do that, we just basically build up the data set, and then it allows us to say, like, here are all the pushes, right? And what we end up doing is we end up creating a list of these things. Like, so we take these are all whens. I mean, that's a lot, right? And then what we do is, and so this is where I'm pretty sure this is going to fall apart because we just added a new way to do this. Yep. So we end up affinitizing them. So I'm going to do one thing here, and I'm going to do one thing here. This is actually the set that I want to say. So what we end up doing is taking all of those big lists and affinitizing them down to, so we take like 140 things and we affinitize it down to these things, which are, here are the things that cause people to say, oh, what happened? Yeah. So for example, when I don't respect or trust the people I work with, when I feel like I'm working, I feel like the work I'm doing has little or no impact. These are all the things that are pushing people to leave, right? And then when they look for the new job, these are all the things that are pulling them to the new place. And so what we end up doing though is, and again, I'm not doing a really good example. Ryan would not be happy with me at this point, but that's all right. We end up then building a matrix that has all those pushes on one side. Let's see if it comes up. Yep. So it'll have all these, and then you just put zeros and ones in of where they're present or not present in the stories. So it allows us to actually create cluster analysis to say what stories go together. So like by the first of the year, we're going to have this thing together to help teach analysis, but we have a very, again, remember that this is all qualitative data, but at some point in time, we can use some quantitative methods to help us understand what stories are more similar or less similar than each other. And we'll end up using 20-dimensional math to help us do that. And so ultimately, I hear that the frustrations around it, but I've been working on this method for probably about 5 or 6 years, and I've had different ways to hack around it. But ultimately, we're going to have a web-based kind of platform that'll enable you to kind of get that information. So you get all these interviews, and then ultimately you can view the clusters or view the jobs, and then it'll do the initial detailing of those jobs based on all the information that's there. So I hear you on the struggling moment around how do you actually see the patterns. There is some, there's a method I use called the contrast method, where I put the 10 interviews, and again, I hold the interviews separate, like they're almost like 10 pieces of paper. And then I say, which two stories are most alike? And I put them in one corner. And then I say, what story is most different to those two? And I put it on the other side. And then I start to actually do this in a very gestalt way in terms of looking at it. So it's called a contrast method, and it works very, very well. It doesn't require kind of all the analysis that we have here, but by the end, when you get to what the jobs are, by doing it this way, you're actually in the details of every one of these stories, and then you start to see the patterns of what like when this and this and this happen, and they want this outcome. Oh, that's why these go together. So this one is really more about these things. Right. So that's how I can say, like, so like in the Step It Up job in education, there's that whole aspect of, basically we know that they tried to go to school before. We know that they now have a new responsibility, or they finally have responsibility where they feel like they have to do something. And they have this element of, time is running out, or now or never. And so those are all come from the subtleties of the interview. But when you start to look at it, it's like these people said it and the other people didn't say it. They didn't say the time was running out. They didn't ever talk about time, but these 5 people who were in this one, they all had this element of like, I got to do this now. Like they had a real sense of urgency. And so that's how we actually end up seeing kind of how to analyze it. So to me, like as a big group, the thing is I appreciate everybody kind of, being able to learn the method, learn the techniques to actually interview, get the data. But I'm at the end of the day, I'm a math guy more than anything else. And so part of this is I feel like there's a responsibility for me to kind of come back with a good analysis method that enables everybody to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm. And when I was reading the education case study, I think it was the SNHU or something.
Yep.
In the book, I was wondering about your approach to sampling that. And did you specifically target a certain group of people
No.
On a hypothesis that, people in their early 30s were, wanted to change career, or what informed that?
Yeah. So the one thing is that, so I always try to, and the way I talk about it is most research is hypothesis proving research. You build a hypothesis and then you go do research. I think of jobs as a hypothesis building research. I think of it as like, I have no idea why people are going back to school. So I want the widest sampling of people. I want to know, like at some point, like in some cases, I want to know why people didn't go or they went and they dropped out. So when we did this, we actually did rounds of like, not only we did community college, we did university, we did boot camps, we did seminars, we did what causes people to say today's the day I need to go get education, and it didn't matter the solution, and it went across demographic, psychographic, income, and geography. And so for us, it started with 10 interviews of very different. And then what we did is we realized if we didn't actually have it filled out, that the people in the academic community they'd say, oh, that's interesting, but that's not for us. So we actually filled it out so people could actually buy it.
Yeah, sure.
And so, but it was all this aspect of what's missing and why do I need to go now?
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So it's in some cases it's very high level, but it's very specific in terms of those causal mechanisms.
Yeah, got you. I'll take another question from the group. David Matthew, you mentioned honing your questioning skills by learning interrogation and negotiation techniques. I'm curious to learn more details about how that's helped you dig for answers. What struggle led you to learn from this area, and what were the takeaways?
So I think the first thing is that I realized that I wasn't smart enough to write questions, right? So if this is hypothesis build, like most of the time people are writing a survey because they have a hypothesis or they know enough. And for me, I didn't know enough. The second is what I realized is that people, when you started to talk about what they wanted, like they were guessing and they were lying. And it wasn't like they were lying on purpose. It was like they would not tell me what, they'd withhold or they'd embellish. And you just started to realize like, okay, how do I actually get people to really understand what they're trying to do? And so what the first thing is if you have them talk about the future is always guessing. If I ask you what you're going to have for lunch next Tuesday, you have no idea, but I can say like, how many people are going to have a chicken sandwich? And we can check it. And oh, by the way, I can increase the sample size and say 38% of the people want chicken sandwich, but that's not what causes you to have a chicken sandwich next Tuesday. Right. And so part of this is that if I talk to what did you have for lunch last Tuesday, or tell me about the last time you had a chicken sandwich, and I can understand the role that variety plays, and I can understand the role of where you are and what's going on and the context wrapped around it. Like all that plays a role in how you pick a chicken sandwich. I actually can get people to tell me about the past, the recent past, way better than telling me about the future. Just because I can get everybody to agree that everybody wants to be healthy, the reality is like why people go get healthy is very different than what they hope for.
Yeah.
Right. And so to me, it went back to how do I actually get people to talk about what they did? So now it's more of a Sherlock Holmes exercise. And then when it becomes that, it's like, well, how is this similar to like, interrogation, but, short of waterboarding, like how do I make sure that I can test? And so Chris Voss has a great book where he talks about basically all the different techniques. Like, so for example, I will intentionally play back the story incorrectly to have them fix it. Right. So when they're telling me what's going on, I don't want to say, oh, yep. I actually want to say like, well, no, that's not what it is. So then what is it? It's the aspect of like bracketing or setting up a bad question. Right. It's the notion of like when they I feel like part of the job of the interviewer is to get them to the edge where they have no language, and then start to then introduce new language, but not in a biased way, but in a way to which you're bracketing it to say, so you were excited. Well, you're excited like, the Christmas morning excited, or like excited because it's the weekend, right? And I'm not trying to actually figure it out, but when they use that word and they can't articulate it, it's then I have to go to an analogous space. And so part of this is how do I do that to help reflect where they really were? And so there's a whole bunch, and again, I think the best, like one of the books that I was thinking of writing was around basically interview techniques, but I think Chris Voss has nailed it. And it's really, so if you haven't read his book, you should read his book. It's phenomenal.
There we go. That's going on my reading list. One of the things I wanted to pick up with you was the kind of correlation causation thing. And I agree, there's so much more insight and and detail that you get from kind of speaking to people, especially kind of doing the interview techniques that you've kind of written up. But when speaking to big companies that have invested a lot in their kind of big data systems and their data analytics and all of that, there's sometimes quite a bit of pushback, as in, no, we know exactly who our customers are. They're these types of people. They're people that like curly fries. You know, you're like, what does that got to do with it? So how do you get round those objections?
It's great. It's again another great question. I think part of this is this aspect of most people don't know why. They know who and they know what, but they don't know why. And so so I'm working with a company that makes windows, right? And they are very sophisticated, and they have a marketing system that is like second to none. And they can tell me about every home and every household in the entire United States. And they can tell me almost like how old the windows are in every home. They can tell me like who these people are, what they do, what their income level is, like what zip code they're in, all these different things, right? I'm like, okay, so you know who they are, but why today? What causes people to say, today's the day I'm going to get new windows? And they look at you like, shit, I don't have a clue about that. Right? And so what happens is they don't actually think they actually think in pictures, right? It's like there's a picture of a customer and there's a picture of a window, but they don't think about the movie of how that person goes through time. Like what causes somebody to say like, yeah, I'm going to rip out all my windows. We're going to put new windows in. Oh, by the way, the old ones are okay. What? Yeah. Right. And so it's like, well, these people are wood window buyers and these people are vinyl window buyers. And at the end, you start to realize like, yeah, but before they bought windows, they were neither. So how can I see where they're going to go? And so this is where it's the causal mechanism that you start to realize like, and to be honest, these causes are deeper than what I would say is trends. Like the whole thing is COVID, right? People would say, well, people are doing this because of COVID. It's like, no, I'm doing this because I can't actually travel and I can't do this and I can't do that. And I have these limitations. COVID caused those things to happen. But underlying this job was here before. It's just you weren't in it before because you could travel. But now that you can't travel, this is the job you're in. And so you see that like how you can actually play things out way faster and you don't have to worry about the trend of like, well, everybody's attitude's different now because of COVID. Not really. I can tell you when you can't go to the store and the fact is you don't actually know what to order, like you're going to order online because at some point the people who were ordering online before, they couldn't get to the store.
Yeah.
Right. And it's now there's just more people who can't get to the store.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. That's interesting. Take a couple more questions from here. I think Jim Tinsley was asking a question from an earlier conversation, but just to kind of slightly reframe it, he's talking about latent needs or latent problems that a customer has, doesn't know about them or won't do anything about them. How do you kind of activate that struggling moment when people don't know really what they're struggling about?
Yeah. So this is where I'll screen share. I'll do it off of this one. Hold on. Yeah, I'm going to do it. Let me just share the whole screen. This is going to be dangerous here. We're going to go here. I'm going to go escape. I'm going to go. So here's the thing is that the latent needs, right, is what I would call it. It's a struggling moment that's sitting there that they actually aren't aware of, or that if they did know, they would do something about it. Right. And so this is where when I start to talk about, how do you create this, the space in the brain? Tell me why. There we go. You can see that now, right?
Yeah.
How do you create the first thought? How do you help them create the first thought? That's the better way to say that, by the way. You ask him a question and, oh, by the way, don't answer it. God, can't sleep at night? We got great mattresses. Like, no, I don't need a mattress. Like, can't sleep at night? Yeah, I know I can't sleep at night. Let that fester, right? you tell them a story that literally they start to realize. So my thing is hearing aids. If you talk to people about hearing aids, most elder adults would say they never need hearing aids, right? And then at some point you got to ask the question, like, why is the TV so loud? Right? Yeah. The question is you have to give them a new metric. How come when we go to a restaurant, you don't, they're literally, you're as quiet as we can ever be, but like when we're home, you just never shut up. Like, why are you so quiet at restaurants? You start to ask questions about these things to let them to start to realize, like, why is this happening? What am I going to do about it? And ultimately it's latent because they've chosen to do nothing about it. And so part of this is to let people know about the struggle and give them a way in which to create the space so they can actually wrestle with it. Like, I think of the whole notion of first thought is about literally putting something in my gut and letting it fester, letting it literally mull, or letting it ferment. And it's that aspect of it gains energy by not being answered, and literally it bothers you. And so there's people who will complain about something, but they won't do anything about it. That's not this. Like, these are people who like if you, in the housing market, right? You get people who literally will complain about the neighborhood or complain about, the work of keeping it up, but they're not doing anything about it till, one, they actually can see another side, and two is they have to actually get more push to actually push them to do something. And so that's what I feel is marketing's role and sales's role, is to enable people to create momentum to move forward. So it's not only, it's like, why is the TV so loud? It's like, well, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And we expect them to do that. Right. And part of this is remember, they have a system to create the space. And to be honest, we need to understand how they look. If you already have customers, they've already created the space. You just need to understand how they did it, because for my experience is, for every one person who's done it, there's 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 people behind them who haven't done it yet, and they need your help.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because the way you talk about this, it feels like the kind of modern day salesperson is a mixture of that kind of curious, very kind of observational researcher blended with someone that has that kind of very broad knowledge base of a salesperson that can map different things to what the customer's situation is.
So think about what it takes to be a salesperson, right? I not only have to know psychology, I have to know this stuff. I have to know the product. I have to know the financial side of the product. I have to know the delivery side of the product. I have to actually understand their business. Like, the most sophisticated people in the company are usually the salespeople. And we try to actually just make them simple, show up and throw up and close and sales, like order takers. And the reality is sales is actually a very, very hard profession, but it's not seen as a profession.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to your point is, like, they are a researcher. Like, at some point in time, they just aren't trained to be a researcher, and they are trained to actually have a way to articulate it that way. They just figure it out on their own. Like, sit down with somebody who's been selling software for 20 years, and you'll see that they've just learned this over time, but they don't know how they learned it.
Yeah. Sure.
Like when you're a founder, you realize sales is the hardest thing because you're doing it all the time, and it's about the integration of everything. It's not about the calling out of things, right? And marketing is really about getting attention and getting the lead. But it's like, as soon as I know that it's got to be easy and fun, I'm out. Like, easy and fun. Who wants to buy easy and fun? Oh, but look, I got all these people who want easy and fun. Like, as a product person, like, how do I cause fun? What the hell is fun? There's 28 ways to do fun. Which one are we talking about? And by the way, I don't have enough time or money to do all of them, and they don't all work together. So what kind of fun? We talk about randomized fun, like unpredictable fun? Or we talk about new fun, like, oh, I've never done that. That was fun. Never did that before. Like, what fun? Like, this is where the interrogation part is. Like, marketing. I feel like marketing is gasoline and has an engine that needs gasoline. And from a innovation perspective, I have a rocket, and I can't put gasoline in a rocket.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, sure, sure.
And the other hard, sorry, I just want to add the one other hard part is the notion of hypotheses. I think in the book I talk about, Peter Drucker going like companies actually think they know more about the customer, and they actually probably know less than they actually like it's this very improportional thing, and they actually don't understand, like they understand what they're selling, but they don't understand why the customer buys. And he said this in 1950, and at some point in time we've gotten very much more sophisticated with analytics, and again we can tell you who, but when you analyze the way he talked about that, what he meant is we just don't understand the situation people are in, and why they're buying it, and we think they're buying it because of the color of the car, and they're buying it because they're having their third kid.
Yeah, sure, totally get it. Yeah. So we've talked about sales. There's a question here from someone we both know, Derek Sutton.
Yeah.
How would applying jobs to be done benefit marketing teams?
Oh, how do I get Derek to come up out of the audience? Because at some point in time that was a softball one, right? I think the reality is it goes back to this slide here where we're trying to. By the way, there's Derek right there in the lower corner. It's this slide here of being able to actually realize that the sales team and the marketing team are actually on the same team. And if they actually align to help people make progress, it's like it's this aspect of, I need marketing's help all the way through the process. Like for some reason, well, marketing's done once I got the lead. It's like, no. I need your help to bring other people along. I need to actually build a way in which to help our internal salesperson market this to the other people in the organization. Like for some reason, we feel like we're done when we have the lead and we have a handoff. And the customer success people, literally, they should actually be back up here to understand the context way more, to really understand the implications of how they're going to do it. And so, to me, the marketing people, they're trying. So, and this is a little biased. I apologize if it's too strong, but most marketing people are trying to abstract words up to the highest level that will resonate with the most people. Easy and fun, right? And at the end of the day, easy and fun means so many different things that the fact is like we only deliver on like 1/10 of the definitions of easy and fun, but we feel like the market is 10 times bigger because we say it that way. So I feel like as a marketer, I want a thesaurus so I can abstract up. And as a developer and as a salesperson, I actually need a dictionary to make sure I understand what we're talking about. Because at some point, the way we buy media, it's about putting a blanket wide. And so to me, what I've been able to work with Derek on is, as we get the language that's the right language at the right level, it resonates, and it's not more abstract. It's actually way more concrete, but it's way more meaningful, and it actually adds energy for them to move. Right? And so most marketing doesn't actually include the problem. They only talk about the solution. And here's the funny part. When you're in actually passive looking, you only know how to search for the problem. Yeah. So half of the easy low-hanging fruit is literally say, like, when you're in this situation and this is going on and you want this outcome, we can help, because they only know how to write the bad part of it. They don't even know what the features and benefits mean. I need a CRM. What does that mean?
Yeah, sure. I guess marketing's role is all about positioning as well, and positioning against the other options in the market. Yes. One of the things that I've seen in just happening in the world generally is some company comes up with a great product that answers a job to be done really, really well, and then people follow fast on that. So, for example, I heard in the news today that that Amazon was bringing out a Peloton competitor at like half the price for customers. How does a company like Peloton, that's significantly smaller than someone like Amazon, defend that position that they've gained? And is that a marketing role? Is that a sales role? Like, what's involved there?
So I think my favorite is if you just look at like how Android just copied Apple.
Mm.
Apple still has like 90, like if you look at the number of units out there, Apple has less than 30%, like 28% or something less than that of the units that are out there, but they have 97% of the profit.
Yeah.
Right. And so part of this is you have to realize what's the metric you're trying to get to and what are you trying to do and where are you trying to go with it. And at some point in time, it's the subtleties, right? So think of this as like the difference between like, so do you have an iPhone or do you have an Android?
I have an iPhone, yeah.
You have an iPhone, right? And so when you go to text somebody and you send it, right? What happens?
It says sent. It says
It
delivered.
says sent. And then what happens when they pick it up?
It says read. Yeah.
And then what else does it say?
I don't know.
But when they start typing, what happens?
Yeah, you get the bubbles. Yeah.
The 3 dots.
3 dots.
Right.
Yeah.
The struggling moment is like, I sent something to you. Like, okay, you read. Are you sending back? Should I be waiting here? Do I not wait here? Like, I don't like. That's all around the subtleties of that struggling moment, right? And the fact is like at some point, Android doesn't have it, and at the same time, other people have copied it. But the reality is like by them actually solving it first, it literally creates a reason for people not to switch back. Like my favorite was, like when somebody is added to a text group and they make it go green, I'm like, oh shit, because then I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Right. And it's that one of those things where it's like and now like I almost have to watch it more often because I know when people are actually doing things back and forth. And so it's this aspect of solving struggling moments is important and people can copy, but solving a struggling moment always creates a new struggling moment. Right. So part of this is actually understanding what are the next things. And so to me, what Peloton should be doing is moving past it because it's just the beginning. If they structure to defend it by itself, the fact is that they'll actually end up, to be honest, digging in and now it's going to get down to a cost structure. Right. But if they actually start to think about how do they get other people to use it and what are the differences between it and interview people who took the cheap option, like my belief is as you start to look at it, they've actually started to do this where you can just buy a bike and use the app on your phone. And so you don't actually have to use their bike anymore. Right. So they're actually doing things where they can actually do those things. And so part of it is to understand why would people buy that service without the device.
Yeah, I know. It's good.
Right. And so to me, it's that intimacy around the customer and understanding what the customer is, what are they struggling with and when is enough, right? When is it too much?
Yeah.
Right. And what you start to realize is when you focus on the product, the easiest thing to do is always add more and more and more and more features. And if you've noticed, Apple has not done, they've done it in some places, but in most places they keep that level of simplicity almost sacred.
Yeah. I want to pick up on something you said as part of that answer around kind of psychology and the psychology of, the little prompts about delivered, read, and then the dots in the messaging. It feels like some of the execution around a design of a product, around a job, is very kind of grounded in behavioral sciences and psychology. What's the link there in your experience?
Yeah, I have to think about. I'm not sure I'm qualified to talk about this, quote, the psychology of it. The way. And Ryan and I talk about this a lot, which is this notion of energy. Like how do we actually understand the emotion of the software, right? Most people can talk about the task of the software or the functional part of the software, but there's this issue of like where's like, where am I afraid? Where am I apprehensive? Where am I confident? Like when I'm in this situation, like for example, we're talking about Basecamp right now and 4. And one of the things is like, what do we do with a task that's not a task yet? It's like, I kind of think it's a task, but I don't like, I actually might have to flesh it out more. Do I just write it and put it in there? Do I actually put it to the side? Do we put it in like, where does this go? And so part of this is, you can say it's the psychology of it, but it's trying to actually understand the combination of the flow of things and the energy that are like the bumps along the way and the things that you're trying to get done.
Okay.
Right. And so it's taking into account the notion of I don't want to go psychology like to Freud, right? Like it's not that deep, right? But it is taking into account that when you hear or see this thing, like you know to wait, and then you're like, okay, the three dots. There's this notion of like, okay, is the three dots is like that anticipation point, right? So how long do you actually keep the three dots before it goes away?
Yeah.
Right. And it's one of those things where it's like those are emotional. Those are not functional decisions. Ultimately, I have to make a functional decision of like at 2.3 seconds of in that field and not typing anything, you make it go away. Like but it's like the thing that helps us make the decision is the emotion wrapped around it, not the function.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And so that I don't know if I answered that question right, but I'm because I'm dyslexic, I'm not very scholarly in lots of subjects like that. I wish I could know more about that, but there's only so many hours in a day.
It was just something I observed reading the book, and you came up with a few examples. The Uber was the other one, wasn't it? Where you can see the car on the map and where it's going, and you talked about, I might have time for another quick drink in the bar.
Yep.
For me.
Yep. Or where are they going? Like, do I need to text them because they're lost? Right. There's that like at some point, if you're on a time frame and you're trying to get to the airport, it's like, and so what they did is they actually had people able to pick up rides and then finish the ride, but they weren't coming to you. And you're like, wait a second, they turned left there. They should have turned right there. What's going on? And now it would say basically just wrapping up another ride, be there in a minute. And so it's the notion of, okay, they're headed the right direction, but they got to go somewhere else to get there. Like, okay, now I'm not as anxious as I used to, but like, oh my God, they're lost. Yeah. I mean, that's a big anxiety.
Yeah. Right, we are running out of time, so I'm going to pick a couple of questions, quick fire questions, just to wrap this up. There's one person called Devin Smith who says, any recommendations on sample size? He's in the process of doing 2 different jobs to be done studies.
Yeah.
Curious about when enough interviews are enough.
Yeah. So the way I think about sample size, and I'm going to see if I can get this to work. Can I get this to work? Maybe I can't. I cannot. Darn it. All right. We'll just do it this way. I'm sorry. So the way I think about sample size is the fact is that I can cause the sample size to be different, or I can actually just randomize it. Randomizing makes me have to actually do larger sample sizes. So I limit mine to 10, and I'd rather do like 2 rounds of 10 than do 20. And the 10 though are they're picked. They're chosen by their demographic differences. So I want to make sure I'm covering, like if I've got 10 and I've got to cover like the age space, like, all right, I need 3 under 25, or 3 under 30, I need 4 between 30 and 50, and I need 3 at the other end. I need urban and I need rural. So half will be urban, half will be rural. I use what they call a designed experiment to actually figure out how to define the space without having to, or to represent the space without having to randomly pick things. And so I learned this from a gentleman called Dr. Genichi Taguchi, who's my, what would I say? He's one of my other mentors. And I would say, oops. Sorry, one sec. Sorry. And he basically taught me about something called orthogonal arrays. Ryan Singer is probably, he's been reading a lot about Dr. Taguchi that way. So if you look in my office across the top, I have Dr. Deming, Clay, Dr. Genichi Taguchi, and then Dr. Willie Hobbs Moore. Those are my 4 big mentors. That's what my next book is about. It's called Learning to Build, and it's talking about the skills they taught me to actually teach me how to build things.
That's cool. Very cool.
Sorry, I finally got the thing to work. I was gonna draw a picture, but it's like not quite right. Yeah. Anyway, what else? Any other questions?
2 more quick fire questions. One is, if you are building a team with demand side thinking at the heart, what kind of attributes or mindsets would you be looking for in that hiring process?
Yeah. So in some cases, I want supply side expertise, but I want the humbleness to realize we don't know the demand side well. Like, it's almost like the vacuum of, like, we need to build the hypotheses and we need to actually build the language from the demand side, as opposed to building the language that we use from the supply side. And so it's this aspect to me of people who are open enough to actually ask questions and know and admit they don't know, and that they can learn along the way. So I would, this is where, to be honest, I'd much rather have a room full of B and C students than A students, because A students all think they have the answer. And what I've learned is that, like, none of us have the answer.
Yeah.
Right. So to me, it's people who are humble and open to learning, and not, again, not trying to prove themselves, but willing to learn.
Nice. Yeah. Agree with that. And then final question from Eckhart. Bob, do you see any parallels between jobs to be done for sales and the trusted advisor concept?
I think the thing is I think trusted advisor is like one form of it, but I think the fact is like, why people, buy Intercom without a salesperson. Like, I don't have to have a trusted advisor, but I have a process that enables me to actually figure out what I really need. Like Casper is actually helping me find a bed that fits me by asking me some really good questions. And people would say, God, the sales process was great, but it really was an automated sales process. So I don't think it's just a trusted advisor. It's almost the notion of like somebody who knows me, or is at least knows enough about me to help me be a better me.
Yeah, sure.
So you could call it a trusted advisor, but like when we sold homes, one of the things we had a Mad Lib, and we'd say, like, we'd ask the four basic questions of like, why do you need to move? What's pushing you to move today? What are you hoping for in the next house? What are you most worried about in trying to move? And what are the things you love about your current house, right? And then we build a Mad Lib out of it. And out of it, we then say, hi, my name's Bob. I need to move because, and it would be these fill in the blank kind of things. And we'd have a paragraph that would say, like, all right, is this your story? And then we'd say, if you want to fix it, they could go backwards or push another button and then say, add more. And people would add 4 or 5 pages to it. And so it's that notion of like, they thought our salespeople were amazing, but they hadn't actually interacted with anybody yet.
Yeah, sure. And I guess in that experience, well, it is an experience, isn't it? And actually, it comes back to a quote I use quite a lot with people that are getting into jobs to be done, and that's from Clay, who talked about it's not about the kind of features and functions that you offer; it's about the experiences you enable. And going back to Intercom, it's the experiences they enable with connecting your business to your customers, rather than the features and the functions. That doesn't come across as strongly on their website, and therefore I guess their sales process, if you go through it.
One of my favorite interviews with Intercom early in the day was the fact that it was like somebody goes like, it's like I opened a restaurant and people are coming into the restaurant, but I have to sit out on the street and watch through the window what they're doing because I can't see what anybody's doing. It's like this notion I can't see. I don't know what and they'll walk out and they'll say, how's the food? And they'll say, oh, it was great. And they're like, yeah, but what did they have? Like, there's just all this, like this whole notion of like, I built this thing and I can't even see what the heck is going on in there. It was just so great. It's like, all right, how do we actually, so now we know how the customer feels. How do we actually make them feel better from there?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Bob. Thank you for your time, and thank you everyone for joining the conversation today and all the great questions you sent through the chat. I thoroughly recommend the book. It's a really insightful read, and a real
and love to come back. Like, my thing is this is a group of people who are very into jobs, and so my aspect is I'm more than happy to come back on a regular or however often as you want me to help. Like, I'm not like this is my mission is so I'm cutting back on projects, I'm teaching more, and I'm trying to actually build things that enable people to do jobs better and more, and like to be better builders. Like, it's really not about jobs, it's about being a better builder of products and a builder of businesses and helping people make progress.
That's great. I think we could have probably had this conversation for another hour and a half. So that would be great to have you back at some point. That'd be brilliant.
Yeah. Whatever you feels right. I'm just trying to make sure you feel it's open whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. We're doing a series of these talks, speaking to different people. We've got another one scheduled for the 11th of November. We're speaking to Eckhart Bain. He's out in Germany.
Yeah, I think he's in Cologne, isn't he? Or Dusseldorf. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, but he's produced a wheel of progress framework, yep, capturing and structuring jobs. So we're going to be speaking to him on the 11th of November. And for anyone else that, you know, has something to share with the community, then we're always interested in hearing that. And we'd love to hear from you again at some point, Bob.
Yep. Yeah, my hard part is that it's like very hard for me to answer questions that people write. I can't read them, and so these kind of forums are really good for me to be able to hopefully contribute, but at the same time, it's the interaction I think is really important. So this is I prefer this kind of medium as opposed to send me questions and let me write answers. That's like, you know, shoot me.
Well, I'll tell you what, as we're all kind of living through this pandemic, it's really nice to actually speak to people, even if it is from our own homes.
Yeah. Well, thank you for reaching out, and thank you for all the help you're giving me on the book. And I have I already have 4 more on the docket. It's just this process is kind of amazing. So it's all about getting it out of my head and paying homage to my, you know, to my mentors. So
that's great. Well, on that note, thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you
everyone for calling in. Yep. I'll end the call now. But thanks everyone.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.